He lay trapped in his own body, forced to listen in silence as his wife betrayed him and plotted his death. The world thought he was gone, but he heard every cruel word, every tear, every confession of the woman who truly cared for him. Now, he is awake, and the truth will change everything. If you believe love is stronger than betrayal, comment below, "True love never dies." The gates of the Valmont estate groaned open, revealing a mansion that seemed more like a monument than a home. Lucia tightened her grip on the small suitcase in her hand. Her heart raced, not from excitement, but from the heavy uncertainty of what awaited her inside. She had been hired under strict conditions, no questions, absolute discretion, and above all, dedication to both the household and its silent master. Inside, the air felt colder, as if the very walls carried secrets. A tall woman with sharp features, Mrs. Gray, the housekeeper-in-chief, met her at the door. Mrs. Gray: "Lucia, you are expected to keep the house in perfect order, but your main responsibility is Mr. Adrian Valmont. You will clean his room, feed him, bathe him, and ensure his comfort. He cannot speak, he cannot move, but you must act as if he is aware of everything." Lucia swallowed hard. "Lucia, I understand. I'll do everything I can." They walked through long, dimly lit corridors until they reached a heavy oak door. Mrs. Gray pushed it open, and the sight froze Lucia in place. Adrian Valmont lay motionless on the bed, his face pale but striking, like a statue carved in marble. His eyes were half open, fixed somewhere in the distance. Machines hummed softly, marking the rhythm of his existence. Mrs. Gray, whispering, "He has been this way for months. Some say he feels nothing. Others believe he sees and hears everything. Regardless, treat him with dignity." Lucia nodded, though her hands trembled. She stepped closer, arranging the blanket over his chest. For a brief moment, she swore she felt his gaze follow her, though his eyes never moved. That night, as she tidied the silent halls of the estate, a shiver ran down her spine. Every creak, every shadow seemed alive, and whenever she passed Adrian's room, the feeling returned. The strange, undeniable sensation that she was being watched. The second morning in the Valmont estate began with silence so heavy that Lucia could hear her own breathing echo through the marble halls. She rose before dawn, her nerves tight, her body already aching from the endless chores of the previous day. The mansion was vast and cold, each corridor lined with portraits of ancestors who seemed to watch her every move. Yet the eyes that unsettled her most were the ones she had left behind in Adrian's room, half open, unmoving, and yet somehow alive. Carrying a tray with breakfast, she pushed open his door. The curtains were drawn tight, allowing only a thin blade of light to pierce the darkness. Dust danced in the beam, suspended in air that smelled faintly of medicine and lavender. Adrian was where she had left him, silent, his chest rising and falling faintly under the weight of the quilt. Lucia placed the tray on the table and spoke, her voice soft but steady, as if afraid of disturbing the stillness. "Good morning, Mr. Valmont. I brought your breakfast." Her words hung in the air, unanswered. She pulled a chair beside the bed, adjusting the pillow behind his neck before lifting a spoonful of broth to his lips. His mouth parted just enough to take it in, the smallest detail, the movement of his throat as he swallowed, filled her with a strange sense of relief. "You're doing well," she murmured. "Better than I expected." She fed him slowly, carefully, every motion deliberate, her hands trembling slightly at first, but as the minutes passed, she found herself speaking more, her voice filling the silence. "I was nervous yesterday. This house is so large it feels like a labyrinth. And quiet, oh too quiet, but I think I'll get used to it." She hesitated, then added with a shy laugh, "Though sometimes I feel like you're watching me. Isn't that strange?" She studied his face, waiting, though she knew no answer would come. His eyes were fixed, but they seemed deeper than before, as though a storm brewed far beneath their surface. The days that followed carried the same rhythm. She cleaned the halls, polished silver, changed sheets, and returned to Adrian's room for meals, baths, and the care Mrs. Gray had instructed her to provide. Yet slowly, a shift occurred. She began to speak to him not out of duty, but out of need. On the fourth morning, while she dusted the shelves lined with heavy books, she began to tell him about her childhood. "My mother used to work as a seamstress. She taught me to sew when I was very little. We didn't have much, but she always found a way to make things beautiful. My father," her voice trailed off, and she tightened her grip on the cloth. "He left us when I was 7. I suppose that's when I learned how fragile people's promises can be." She turned, and her eyes met his. Something inside her urged her to continue. "You probably think I'm foolish for talking so much, but maybe it's better than silence, don't you think? Silence can be cruel." She laughed softly, though her throat ached with unshed emotion. For a moment, she could have sworn that a glimmer of light passed through his eyes, like a spark flickering behind the glass. That night, unable to sleep, she crept quietly into the garden. Moonlight bathed the stone fountains and manicured hedges, but the air was heavy, filled with the weight of secrets. From the balcony above, she noticed a shadow move. For an instant, she thought it was Adrian's wife, Celeste, returned unexpectedly. But when she blinked, the balcony was empty. By the end of the week, she had grown bolder. She brought flowers from the garden to brighten Adrian's room. She played soft music on an old gramophone she discovered in the library, and she spoke to him as if he were a confidant, not a patient. One afternoon, as rain lashed against the windows, she sat beside him with a basket of laundry, folding shirts with careful precision. "Do you know," she began, "when I first came here, I thought you must be terrifying. A man with this much wealth and power, lying here as if carved from stone. But you're not frightening at all. You're different. You listen, even if you don't speak. No one's ever listened to me like that before." Her words caught in her throat. She set the shirt aside and leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. "I don't know what you were like before the accident, but I think there's still so much of you here, and I want to believe you can hear me." The storm outside roared, lightning flashing across the walls, and in its glow she thought she saw his lips tremble, the faintest, most imperceptible movement. Her heart pounded, but she shook her head quickly, convincing herself it was only her imagination. The days blurred into one another. She began to notice the absence of Celeste, the wife who was supposed to be at Adrian's side. Weeks passed, and she had only seen her once, a fleeting vision of elegance and perfume, heels clicking against the marble floor as she passed through without so much as a glance toward her husband's room. It unsettled Lucia. She thought of her own mother, who would never have abandoned someone she loved. She thought of how cruel loneliness could be and how Adrian bore it with silent endurance. By the second week, she no longer treated her time with him as duty. She lingered by his side long after finishing tasks, speaking to him about everything. Her favorite books, the silly mistakes she made in the kitchen, the dreams she once had of becoming a teacher. "You must think me ridiculous," she said one evening, brushing his hair gently back from his forehead, "telling you all these little things, but I feel lighter when I talk to you, as if you understand." She stood, meaning to leave, but something stopped her. Turning back, she whispered, "If you can hear me, even just a little, I hope you know you're not alone." The room was silent except for the soft ticking of the clock. Yet as she left, a shiver ran down her spine, the unmistakable sense that his eyes had followed her all the way to the door. Her dreams that night were filled with those eyes, watching her, speaking without words. She awoke with tears on her cheeks and a strange ache in her chest, as though her heart was answering a call she could not yet hear. And so, without realizing it, The housekeeper, who had come only to serve, began to weave herself into the life of the silent millionaire. In her voice, in her presence, in the warmth of her confessions, a connection was forming, fragile, dangerous, and impossible to ignore. Lucia had begun to feel a fragile rhythm in her days at the Valmont estate. Though the house still pressed in on her with its cold silence, she had found a strange comfort in Adrian's presence. His stillness no longer frightened her. Instead, it felt like a kind of trust, as though he were allowing her into the hidden world of his solitude. She spent hours in his room, tidying, reading aloud, humming while she folded his linens, and speaking to him as if he were her closest companion. She told herself it was harmless, just words filling silence, but deep down she felt something more stirring, something she dared not name. One afternoon, as she polished the stair banister, the sharp click of heels echoed down the marble hallway. She looked up and froze. Celeste had returned. The woman's beauty was undeniable, sculpted and precise. Her golden hair swept into a flawless chignon, her perfume heavy in the air like smoke. She wore a crimson dress that clung to her figure, diamonds glittering at her throat. Her eyes swept across the hallway, barely registering the maid standing there with a cloth in hand. "You must be the new girl," Celeste said, her tone clipped, as if addressing someone beneath notice. "Yes, madam," Lucia replied quietly, lowering her gaze. "Do your work and stay out of trouble," Celeste said, brushing past her without another word. She walked straight past Adrian's room without stopping, without even glancing at the door. Lucia felt her chest tighten. How could she not even look? Later that evening, while delivering clean linens upstairs, Lucia passed by the master bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and voices drifted through the crack. She hesitated, then froze when she recognized Celeste's voice, softer now, almost tender, but not in the way a wife might speak to her husband. "You don't have to worry, darling. Everything went perfectly. He doesn't suspect a thing." Lucia's heart stuttered. She edged closer, careful not to breathe too loudly. Another voice answered, low and male, tinged with laughter. "And the money? Have you secured more access?" "I told you, it's all in my control now," Celeste replied. "Once the divorce goes through, the estate will be ours to enjoy. No one will question a widow with her inheritance." Lucia's blood turned cold. Divorce. Widow. She pressed a hand against her mouth, forcing herself not to gasp. "You're brilliant," the man murmured. There was the sound of lips meeting, soft laughter muffled between them. Lucia stumbled back, nearly dropping the linens. She pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding so loudly she feared they would hear it. Her mind reeled. What had she just heard? Divorce, inheritance, a plan that had gone perfectly. The accident. Her chest tightened as realization crashed into her. It hadn't been an accident. She fled down the corridor, clutching the linens to her chest like a shield. Back in her small quarters, she paced the floor, trembling. She thought of Adrian lying helpless in his bed, his eyes staring into nothingness. Had he known? Did he suspect the woman who shared his name had betrayed him so cruelly? The next morning, she entered his room with trembling hands. She forced a smile, setting the breakfast tray on the table. "Good morning, Mr. Valmont," she whispered, though her voice cracked. She adjusted his blanket, brushed his hair back from his forehead, and tried to hide the storm raging inside her. She could not keep it in. As she fed him, her words spilled out, soft and trembling. "I heard something yesterday, something terrible, and I don't know what to do." She paused, searching his face. "It was your wife. She was with another man, and she said she planned everything, even the accident. She wants your money. She doesn't care about you at all." Her throat tightened, tears welled in her eyes, blurring her vision. "You don't deserve this. No one deserves this." She set the spoon down, her voice breaking. "If you could hear me, if you could speak, I'd tell you to fight for your life, for your truth. But I don't even know if you can hear me at all." She pressed her hands to her face. sobbing quietly. When she lowered them, she thought she saw a glimmer of moisture at the corner of his eye, but she told herself it was only her imagination. Days passed, and Lucia could not banish the conversation she had overheard. Celeste drifted in and out of the mansion like a stranger, always in dazzling gowns, always with a faint trace of another man's cologne clinging to her. She never entered Adrian's room, not once. One night, long after the house had gone still, Lucia crept into the library. She searched through drawers and cabinets, guided by nothing but instinct. At last, tucked inside a leather-bound ledger, she found what she feared: insurance documents, signed only weeks before Adrian's accident, with Celeste's name scrawled greedily across the beneficiary line. Her hands shook as she clutched the papers. It was true, all of it. She hurried to Adrian's room, her heart pounding. She sat beside him in the dim light of the lamp, the documents trembling in her grip. "Look," she whispered, though tears blurred her vision. "I found proof. She planned everything. She wanted you gone." Her voice cracked with anger. How could she? How could someone who vowed to love you do something so cruel? Her hands fell to her lap, the papers fluttering to the floor. She leaned closer, her forehead nearly touching his. "I wish I could save you from her," she whispered. "I wish I could protect you, but I'm just the maid. No one would believe me." Her tears fell freely now, sliding down her cheeks, dripping onto his motionless hand. She closed her eyes, her heart breaking for the man who could not defend himself, the man whose only witness to betrayal was silence. And yet, in the quiet of that room, she felt it again, the inexplicable sense that he was listening, that every word she spoke, every confession, was being carried deep into him like a secret vow. Her sobs faded into silence. She wiped her eyes and gathered the papers, hiding them beneath her apron. "I'll find a way," she whispered fiercely. "I don't know how, but I will. You're not alone. Not as long as I'm here." The clock ticked softly, steady as a heartbeat. In the darkness, Adrian's eyes glistened, and though his lips did not move, a single tear traced down his cheek, silent and unseen. Lucia could not sleep that night. She lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying every word she had whispered to Adrian, every tear that had fallen on his still hand. The papers she had discovered were hidden beneath her mattress, as if concealing them would also conceal the horror of what they meant. But nothing could silence the truth now. Celeste had tried to kill her own husband. At dawn, she rose and dressed quickly. The corridors of the mansion felt darker than usual, the portraits on the walls seeming to lean closer as she passed. When she entered Adrian's room, she stopped short. For the first time since she had begun caring for him, she felt afraid, not of him, but of the weight of what she carried. He was no longer simply her employer, no longer just the silent figure confined to bed. He was a victim of betrayal so vast it made her blood run cold, and she was the only one who knew. She set the tray down on the table and moved to his bedside. His face was pale in the morning light, the faint rise and fall of his chest the only sign of life. She brushed his hair back gently, her fingers trembling. "Good morning," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking about you, about her, about everything." She sat in the chair beside him and took his hand, her thumb brushing across his knuckles. The touch steadied her, gave her courage. "I know the truth now," she said softly. "I know what Celeste did to you, and I don't know how to live with it. You didn't deserve any of this." Her voice broke, tears spilling down her cheeks. "If only you could speak. If only you could tell me what to do." Her sobs filled the room, quiet but raw. She pressed his hand against her cheek, closing her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I wish I could save you." As her tears fell onto his skin, something shifted. She didn't notice at first, lost in her grief, but when she finally lifted her head, she froze. A single tear glistened at the corner of his eye. Her breath caught. "Adrian," she whispered, leaning closer. His face was still, unchanged, yet the tear was unmistakable. She reached for a handkerchief, dabbing it gently away, her hands trembling. You can hear me, can't you?" But there was no movement, no sign beyond that solitary tear. She sank back into the chair, her heart pounding, her mind torn between hope and despair. That afternoon, while changing his linens, she could no longer hold back the torrent of words building inside her. "You know," she said quietly, tucking the sheets beneath his body, "I've been talking to you for weeks now, and I don't even know if it makes any difference. But somehow, I feel like it does. I feel like you're listening, and it's strange, because I've told you things I've never told anyone." She paused, her eyes fixed on his face. "I've told you about my father leaving, about how hard it was for my mother to raise me alone, about how I never finished school even though I wanted to, and you listen. You don't judge. You don't turn away." Her voice softened. "Do you know what that means to someone like me? To feel seen, even by someone who can't move?" She folded the last corner of the sheet and sat down heavily, her chest aching. "I should be careful," she admitted. "I'm starting to care too much. You're my employer, and I'm just the maid, but sometimes I feel—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "It doesn't matter what I feel." She leaned forward, resting her forehead against the back of his hand. "I just wish you weren't trapped inside yourself. I wish you could tell me everything, so I wouldn't feel like I'm carrying this burden alone." That evening, Celeste swept into the house, her perfume filling the corridors. Lucia heard her laughter drifting from the drawing room, the clinking of glasses, the low murmur of a man's voice. She clenched her fists, her stomach twisting with anger. How could she laugh while her husband lay helpless upstairs? How could she fill the house with her frivolity while her betrayal rotted its foundation? She longed to storm into the room and scream the truth, to expose Celeste's treachery to the world. But who would believe her? She was nothing, a maid with no power, no status, no voice. The thought crushed her, and yet when she returned to Adrian's room, she found herself speaking her fury aloud. "She doesn't love you," she said bitterly, pacing the room. "She doesn't even see you. You gave her everything, and she gave you betrayal." She stopped at his bedside, her voice trembling. "But I see you. Do you hear me? I see you." Her words rang through the silence, fierce and desperate. She dropped into the chair, her hands covering her face. "I don't know what's happening to me," she whispered. "I'm supposed to keep my head down, do my work and leave, but I can't stop thinking about you. I can't stop caring, and it scares me because it feels wrong, it feels impossible, and yet it's the truest thing I've ever felt." Her tears flowed freely, her sobs racking her small frame. She didn't notice the faint twitch of his finger, the almost imperceptible movement of his lips, but deep inside, Adrian heard her, every word, every confession, every tear, and though he could not yet respond, his heart reached out for her in the darkness, aching with the same forbidden longing. Night fell, and Lucia lingered by his side until exhaustion pulled her into sleep, her head resting against the edge of his bed. In the quiet of the room, Adrian's eyes glistened again, another tear slipping down his cheek, not of despair this time, but of awakening. He could not speak, he could not move, but he could feel, and in her voice, her touch, her love, he found the strength to keep fighting. For the first time since the accident, Adrian Valmont's silent world was not filled with emptiness. It was filled with her. The morning broke grey and heavy with rain, the kind of rain that seemed to soak into the very bones of the house. The Valmont estate felt more suffocating than ever, its walls closing in as though they, too, had been keeping secrets. Lucia moved quietly through the halls, her body weary from restless nights, her heart raw from the emotions that consumed her. Every day she had spent by Adrian's side had only deepened the strange, forbidden bond between them. She had whispered truths into the silence of his room, confessed her fears, her hopes, her longing, and though he never answered, She felt he carried those words inside him. When she entered his room that morning, she sensed something was different. The air felt charged, alive, as though the storm outside had seeped into the chamber. Adrian lay as always, still and pale, but there was something in his eyes, something sharper, more focused. She paused, her breath catching in her throat. "Good morning," she whispered, placing the tray down with trembling hands. She moved to adjust his blanket, as she always did, and then stopped short. His fingers twitched. Just the slightest movement, almost invisible, but it was real. Her heart leapt. "Adrian!" she breathed, her voice barely more than a gasp. She bent closer, watching intently. His lips moved, just slightly, as though shaping a word. Tears filled her eyes. You're waking up, aren't you?" She rushed to call Mrs. Gray, her voice breaking with urgency. Within minutes, doctors filled the room, their coats brushing past her as they examined the man who had been locked in silence for so long. Words of disbelief filled the air. Muscle response, neurological activity, extraordinary recovery. Lucia stood pressed against the wall, her hands clutched at her chest, tears spilling down her cheeks. Hours passed, tests were run, and by late afternoon, Adrian's voice, hoarse, broken but unmistakable, cracked the air. Lucia, her name, on his lips. The sound stole her breath. She rushed forward, kneeling beside the bed, her hands trembling as she took his. "I'm here," she whispered. "I've always been here." His eyes found hers, and though his body was weak, his gaze burned with clarity. "I heard you," he said slowly, each word dragged from deep within. "Everything, all this time, I heard." Her heart stopped. She stared at him, unable to believe. You could hear." "Yes." His voice broke, but his eyes held hers with fierce intensity. "I heard you, your stories, your tears, your truth. You saved me, Lucia." She wept openly now, her forehead pressing against his hand. The doctors spoke in astonished whispers behind her, but she barely heard them. All that mattered was that he was awake, that he had heard, that she had not been speaking into emptiness. Later that evening, as the rain still hammered the windows, Celeste returned. Her heels clattered across the marble floor, her perfume filling the halls as she strode toward her husband's chamber. When she opened the door and saw him sitting upright, supported by pillows, his eyes alive for the first time in months, her face blanched. "Adrian," she gasped, forcing a smile. "You're awake! Oh, my love, this is a miracle!" She rushed forward, her arms outstretched, but Adrian's expression hardened. He raised a trembling hand, stopping her in her tracks. "Don't!" he rasped. She froze. "What do you mean?" "Adrian, I'm your wife." "I heard everything," he interrupted, his voice hoarse but strong enough to cut through the room. His gaze pierced her, unyielding. "Every word you spoke to him, every plan, every lie." Celeste's face drained of color. What are you talking about?" "You tried to kill me," he said, his voice steady now, fury building beneath the surface. "You and your lover. You thought I was gone, but I was there. I heard it all." Lucia stood behind him, her heart pounding, her hands clenched tight. Celeste's mask faltered. For a moment her eyes flickered with panic, but then she straightened, forcing a cold smile. "You have no proof. You're confused, delirious." Adrian's hand slammed weakly against the arm of his chair, the effort draining him, but his words thundered through the room. "Enough! I will not live another day with you under my roof. You betrayed me. You will never touch my fortune, my life, nor my name again." He turned to the doctors, to Mrs. Gray, to every witness in the room. "You all heard me. She is to leave this house at once. I want a divorce. Effective immediately." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Celeste's eyes blazed with fury, but her beauty seemed to crack, revealing the venom beneath. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "You think this little servant can replace me? She's nothing, nothing but a girl who scrubs your floors." Lucia flinched, her cheeks burning with shame and anger. But Adrian's voice rose again. fierce despite his weakness. "She is everything you are not," he declared. His gaze turned to Lucia, softening. "She gave me love when you gave me betrayal. She gave me life when you gave me death." Celeste's breath caught, fury twisting her features. She spun on her heel, her heels clattering as she stormed from the room. Silence fell. The doctors exchanged glances, whispering among themselves, but Adrian's attention never wavered from Lucia. He reached for her, his hand trembling, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Lucia," he whispered, his voice breaking with emotion, "stay with me. Don't leave me now. I need you." She sank to her knees beside him, tears streaming down her face. "I'll never leave you," she promised, clutching his hand. "Not as long as you want me here." Adrian closed his eyes, a shuddering breath escaping him. For the first time since the accident, he felt free, free of the chains of silence, free of the poison that had haunted his home. And as he opened his eyes again, they were filled not with despair, but with hope. Hope born from the woman who had seen him when no one else had. The storm outside raged on, but within the walls of his chamber, something had shifted. The truth had been spoken, the betrayal cast out, and in its place, a new beginning had taken root. Adrian Valmont, once silent and broken, had awakened, not just to life, but to love. Lucia stood in her small room, her belongings gathered neatly on the bed. The few dresses she owned, a pair of worn shoes, the sewing kit her mother had given her before she died. She folded each item with trembling hands, her eyes blurred with tears. The house was quiet now, too quiet. Celeste had been forced out, her fury echoing down the marble corridors as she departed. But even in her absence, the mansion felt haunted. Haunted by betrayal, by secrets, and by the lingering fear that Lucia herself had no place here anymore. She whispered to herself, as if rehearsing the words she might say to Adrian before she left. "Thank you for letting me care for you. Thank you for listening. But this is impossible." Her throat tightened. "I don't belong in your world." The sound of footsteps in the hall broke her thoughts. She froze, clutching the folded dress to her chest. Then a voice, weak but steady, carrying the weight of determination. "Lucia." She turned. Adrian stood in the doorway, leaning heavily on the cane a doctor had given him, his body still frail but his presence commanding. His eyes, no longer vacant, burned with clarity. "You're leaving me," he said. Lucia's lips parted, but no words came. She set the dress down and forced herself to face him. "I thought it was best. You've regained your strength, and now you can rebuild your life. You don't need me anymore." Adrian stepped closer, his steps slow, deliberate, every movement costing him effort. Yet his gaze never wavered. "You're wrong," he said quietly. "I need you more than ever." She shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. "You're a Valmont. You have wealth, influence, power, and I," her voice faltered, "I'm just a maid. People will never accept this. They'll say I trapped you, that I used your weakness to get close to you." Adrian's jaw tightened, his voice gaining strength. "Let them say what they will. I know the truth. You were the only one who saw me when I was nothing but a shadow. You gave me dignity, care, love, when even my wife turned away. Without you, I would have surrendered to silence. You saved me, Lucia, and I won't let you walk away." Her heart pounded, her body torn between longing and fear. She turned away, unable to meet his gaze, but he crossed the room, his trembling hand reaching for hers. His touch was warm, alive, a promise in itself. "Look at me," he whispered. She did, her tears falling freely now. "You were the only one who truly saw me," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "Stay, be my wife." Lucia gasped, her hand flying to her lips. The words hung in the air, heavier than the walls around them, stronger than the storm of doubt that raged inside her. "Adrian," she whispered, "you can't mean that." "I've never meant anything more," he said firmly, though his body trembled with the strain of standing. I don't want a life of wealth, of appearances, of lies. I want truth. I want love. And I found it in you." She shook her head, overwhelmed. "I don't know how to be a wife to a man like you. I don't know how to live in your world." "Then we'll build a new world together," he said simply, his hand lifted to her cheek, brushing away her tears. "One where love is enough." The sincerity in his eyes broke the last of her resistance. She collapsed into his arms, holding him as though she might never let go. His embrace was weak but steady, the embrace of a man reborn. For the first time since the accident, he felt whole. For the first time in her life, she felt chosen. Their lips met, not in the desperate passion of forbidden longing, but in something deeper, purer, a kiss of understanding, of healing, of two souls recognizing themselves in each other. When they pulled apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers, his breath unsteady, but filled with hope. "This is our beginning," he whispered. Lucia smiled through her tears, her voice soft but certain. "Yes, our beginning." Outside, the rain eased, the clouds breaking to reveal the first light of dawn. The house, once a prison of silence and betrayal, seemed to exhale, as though relieved of its burden, and within its walls, two hearts, once broken and bound by impossibility, found each other in the simplest, truest vow of all: love. Sometimes, love is not found in grand gestures or perfect lives, but in the quiet moments when someone truly sees us. Adrian had been surrounded by silence, yet it was in that silence that Lucia's voice became his lifeline. In the end, it was not wealth or power that saved him, but love, born from sincerity and care. What about you? Do you believe true love can rise from the most unlikely places? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to know your opinion. And don't go anywhere. The next story is already on your screen, waiting for you. Press play and let yourself be carried away.